This podcast is brought to you by the Association for Coaching, an international professional body which is advancing coaching in business and society worldwide. To join our global community and access member-only webinars, events, a wide range of digital learning offerings, coaching and leadership resources, accreditation schemes, and more, you can find us at associationforcoaching.com. Hello and welcome to another episode of Coaching in the Climate Crisis series. My name is George Warren and I'm your host. And today I'm joined by three wonderful coaches, Alison Whybrow, Eve Turner and Josie McLean. And together they founded the Climate Coaching Alliance, absolutely fantastic organisation which has helped me hugely in my development as a coach and as a climate conscious coach. So Alison, Eve, Josie, welcome. I'm so excited to be here today and to get the chance to ask you lots of questions. Would it be helpful to each go in turn and say hello and hear a bit about where you are and the work that you do? Alison, perhaps we can start with you.
Thank you, George. I'm based in just south of London in the UK, and my background is that I'm a psychologist by background, so I do a lot of work in organisational systems, and I now describe myself as a coaching psychologist, so kind of move between individual and organisational level work. So I guess that's me.
Thanks, Alison.
My background is, I started life as a musician, and one of the things I most enjoyed was conducting an orchestra, because I think there are so many lessons I picked up from doing that have helped in terms of coaching, leadership, etc. And I was a senior leader before I became a coach and supervisor. And apart from that, I run something called the Global Supervisors Network, which is a community, rather like the CCA. It's a community of supervisors around the world, global in nature. And I'm also chair of another professional body called Apex. And Josie.
Thank you, Eve. So you might notice from my accent that I'm not from the UK. My ancestors were many years ago. But I'm in Adelaide in South Australia. So that's the middle bit of Australia down the south with all of the fine food and wine. So I live in the Adelaide Hills, and in fact I'd like to acknowledge that I am currently on Peremank land. That's the native nation that lived here before we stole the land from them. And I'm very conscious of that, and that's a story that Australians are starting to come to terms with and starting to accept the history of at the moment. And I think it's actually an important part of the climate conversation as well. I used to be a financial analyst. I was a corporate strategic planner, and I was one of the pioneers of coaching in Australia. And I currently work on individual, team, group and organisational levels, and also in communities, to help them address some of the major challenges that they're facing. I've researched a lot on how organisations might be truly sustainable, or regenerative is the word that we use now. So I'm not sure that I classify myself solely as a coach. I heard someone use the phrase organisational ecologist recently, and that kind of sounds cool.
That's great, Josie. I love that.
Yeah.
Thanks, Josie. Yeah, absolutely. Love it too. So I've spoken a bit about how helpful the Climate Coaching Alliance has been to me in finding my own voice and confidence and my own way to coach around the climate crisis. And I think it would be great to hear in your own words a bit about what the Climate Coaching Alliance does, and maybe something about the aims or the purpose of the organisation.
I might pick that up initially, and perhaps my colleagues can help me. So purpose is something that the CCA has been talking a lot about lately. And our fundamental purpose is to support coaches in their journey, wherever they are, to help them understand how they might engage their clients in these much larger conversations around climate change, because we do believe we've got a limited period of time to do this within. So wherever you are, how do you engage people in this conversation? And there's another layer there, which is it's not just our clients that are in this situation, it's also us. So how do we personally respond to it? And some of that journey can be quite emotional. So I know Alison may want to expand a little bit here in a moment, but on a simple level, how do we support each other through what may be a period of grief when we come to realise that actually the way things were are not the way things are going to be in the future? And then another purpose is to actually be some sort of sand in the making of a pearl within the industry, so that we can help the industry actually engage with climate change as well and ecological crisis, both the professional bodies and the training bodies. So how can we help to generate some systemic change with other people?
I think you've covered it all really well there, Josie, actually. I don't think there's a lot else to say. That is the purpose. And working community informs us that it's through community and through small, trusted relationships and intimate relationships with each other that we can actually do that personal transformational work that's necessary in order to be able to hold the space well for ourselves and our clients. And I guess I'm reminded of something that a colleague said to us this morning, is that if we're not able to hold that almost sacred space for our clients as they transform and emerge and grow, letting go of the reins of control that actually we've been told we have to hold tightly onto, and actually step into what's emerging and to what's unknown and what's uncertain. If we're not equipped to hold that space, then how can we actually support them well on their journey of transformation into reimagining a regenerative way of operating?
Thanks, Alison. And one thing that I'd love to hear would be the story of how the CCA came about and how you three came together.
Well, Alison, I think you were first. It's Eve here. So maybe you could start and then I'll pick up at the point where you brought me in.
Yes, I'm still not sure whether Eve thinks that was a good thing to happen or whether there's any regrets there. Yeah, it's almost that you take the first step and then you suddenly realise the size of the possibility and the potential ahead of you. So I think many of us, Eve, Josie, I, and many of us within the CCA have been sitting, niggling for a long time. How do we bring in our love for the earth and our connection with the earth and our understanding that earth needs a different position in our constellation to the one which we've given it? How do we bring that together with our professional practice and professional purpose? And I guess it was 2019 when I started to think, maybe if coaching redefined itself to be for a living earth, then rather than just for a successful organisation or individual flourishing, maybe if it was for earth flourishing, then coaching might be able to really step into this space. And I followed that thought and I met Zoe Cohen and Linda Aspey, and we came together at a Coaching at Work conference. And Peter Hawkins happened to be there as well. And we decided to write a letter to the professions, to training bodies, and to coach practitioners to declare a climate emergency and to invite coaching and coaches to step up. And there were 10 elements to that stepping up that we articulated. And one of them was to create a global community, because the sense was that, community, whatever the problem, community is the answer, according to Meg Wheatley. And so having decided that if we get people together in the right kind of way, then they will be able to work things out, they'll be able to learn quickly together, then it was, well, who's done this before? And Eve was the really obvious answer. She's built a beautiful community within the Global Supervisors Network. It looked like the sort of thing that might work for the Climate Coaching Alliance or for coaches. And so I reached out to her and Eve.
Yes, you did, Alison, and I was really pleased. I mean, it was good timing because Peter Hawkins and I, there are lots of links, had just, our book was just being published called Systemic Coaching, and we'd obviously alluded to us as a stakeholder throughout the book, and I'd done a lot of thinking around that. And I also have always talked about stakeholders and who are the stakeholders and who else and what else and how do we bring them into our work. So I was thinking that. But one of the beautiful things about the community that Alison was suggesting we stepped up, it wasn't going to be a community for people who were experts. It wasn't going to be a community for people who were beginners. It was a community for anyone who had an interest. It didn't matter where you were on the journey. It was a place where you could come, you could feel safe, you could explore, you could join with peers, and you could collaborate in any way you wanted to. And I just love the concept of community because, exactly as Alison said, I do think community is the answer. And one of the things that we agreed right at the start was it would be free to join the Climate Coaching Alliance, and it would be free to attend all the events, so that there would be no barriers to anyone joining wherever they were in the world, apart from obviously technical ones in terms of the technology to do so. So I was actually very excited. Honestly, Alison, I was. I'm very, very pleased. And I suggested that we ask this wonderful lady that I visited many times in the Adelaide Hills, because I have family in Adelaide, if maybe she might like to get involved, Josie.
You did. And I've had a passion for this work for a long time, sparked really by Sir John Whitmore in 2003, and I've shared this story many times with other people. An epiphany I had as I was speaking with him, and it led me on to doing activist work with the Pachamama Alliance for a few years, setting up a not-for-profit here in Australia, Be the Change Australia, an echo of Be the Change UK that Sir John set up with other folk in the UK. And finally to undertaking some research of my own into how might organisations practically, what's the how-to steps to actually transform an existing organisation into one that nurtures people and planet. So the larger question of regeneration is the word that's used now. Sustainability and sustaining are the words that I used to use. That larger question of how do organisations transform themselves was one that I'd spent a long time researching, and many years travelling to learn from leading systems thinkers and complexity thinkers, and understanding the very nature of sustainability. So it's given me a very deep, visceral understanding of the head and heart of what it is to live sustainably. So I'm not putting myself on a pedestal there. I don't claim that I do, because I still live in a system that is unsustainable. And I think that's a real challenge for all of us, to have one foot in each of two systems, each of two worlds, really. The world we want into the future, which is already here and has tendrils here, and we're living in it, and we want to encourage that into the future. But we're also forced to live and engage with a system that's actually creating all of this destruction. And how do we live with the tension and the dissonance of that? So Eve invited me in, perhaps for these characteristics, perhaps for my Australian characteristic of sort of a, I'm going to be bold here, a no bullshit approach, and fairly direct and candid. I think all three of us, we're like legs on a stool, a three-legged stool. We bring very different things to the triumvirate, if you like. But I'm pretty sure that the stool would fall over without any one of us pretty quickly.
Mm.
Thanks, Josie. Yeah, big smiles on all of our faces there, hearing that. And thank you all. It's a beautifully told story in 3 stages there. And, I heard that you founded, Alison, started thinking about this 2019. So we're coming up to, I guess, the 2-year anniversary. And I'd love to hear what you three think is coming in the next couple of years, not only for the CECA, but more broadly for the coaching industry related to the climate crisis.
And if I could start, it's Eve here. One of the things that's really encouraging is even being invited, thank you, to the AC to do this podcast, because I think when we first set it up, if we go back, we had our first meeting in November 2019, the three of us, and then we had this idea that in December, like it was only less than a month away, we'd try and get everybody from every professional body. We'd get somebody from every professional body and some of the leading thinkings in the world to come to a meeting to talk about this. And we were rather amazed that they all did. And so I think there's been a lot of support for this area of work. And I don't think it's just this area of work, because I think that there is an absolute recognition that equity, in terms of climate equity, is linked to racial equity, political equity, economic equity, etc. So although we're talking about climate, they are intrinsically linked and interconnected. I think the work is already starting. You've invited us in. All the professional bodies have had some activity. I mean, I say all, but the largest professional bodies. So there's now a global statement on climate change, which was developed, I think it was first published it was May the 28th last year. And it started with 5 signatories, and there are now, I think, 11 signatories. And that, to have a statement, that was unique within the world of coaching. So I think there is already work that is going on and is actively going on and is being considered. So as we're sitting here talking, there's a website being developed for that statement and resources being planned and links to other resources. So I think that's sort of where we are, which is a lot different perhaps from where we were 2 years ago. So I just like to start by saying that and then let Alison and Josie pick up.
So maybe, Josie, if you can, I think you might expand on what I'm going to try to say here. So I think the landscape has shifted in the last 2 years, as Eva said, and it's wonderful that we have this space now. And I think what I'm sensing, we caught a wave that was ready to be caught. So we had our surfboard in the right place at the right time. And the challenge now is to shift the landscape of what we think we see coaching is. So I'm sort of saying that, and it sounds like quite a big thing, but I think one of the challenges is that if people see this as climate coaching, that it's a thing that you do alongside your other sorts of coaching, then the Climate Coaching Alliance will not have achieved its purpose, because it's not something that's alongside, it's something that shifts actually how we see the premise upon which we operate as coaches and human beings on the earth. And so I think our challenge is to hold the window open long enough to allow people not to get into the space of knowing too early, and to stay in the space of not knowing and really expanding and being open to what needs to shift. Otherwise we will just stay where we are, and we will not have brought about any fundamental change to the way of doing business. And so we will just continue to fall over the edge of the cliff that we're teetering on.
It's such a big question that you've asked, George, and it's one that we've been sitting with a little bit lately together. Just building on what Alison was talking about there, I think, the nature of coaching as we know it, I think is going to, it's not that we have to discard what we've learned, but I think it's a transcend and include type of thing. So to keep what we already know and to expand it, and I love that expression that Alison just used, expanding the lens sort of thing, broadening the lens, deepening the lens, becoming more aware of the very ways in which we practice coaching. And even if we think of the way we set up our businesses, and the way we work within businesses, the way we think of and use the language around our clients and us as the coach and them as the client. All of that, I think, will come into question over the next couple of years as we start to explore what does it mean to coach through this systemic lens, and we get more refined at being able to do that. And, even Peter have started this movement towards systemic coaching. And I think we will learn that there's even more to it yet. And we will all be able to contribute to it. And we will have different versions of it. So, for some people, systems thinking is a very cerebral thing. For me, it's like a window into the spiritual and the sacred. For others, the path is through coaching in nature, with nature. For others, it's shamanic drumming. none of these are wrong. And I think the space of the CCA is to hold the space open for all of these things to flourish, that there will be lots and lots of different ways. And in that way, the methodologies available to us as coaches will be vast enough that each of us individually will find something that suits us, and also vast enough to meet the complexity of the challenge that's in front of us. Trying to find a model that is climate coaching is going to be a surefire recipe for failure, I think. It's a lot more than that. And I love, I'm sort of struck because I live in a country that's not far from China, by Mao Zedong's phrase of let 1,000 flowers bloom. That's what we hope to do within the CCA, to let 1,000 flowers bloom. Let all of the richness and creativity that people bring bloom in this space, and let's see what it produces.
Thanks, Josie. Beautifully put. And, collectively, you've touched on something of a theme in this podcast series, which is that it's not just about climate change. And it's been said that climate change is a symptom of what's more widely going on in financial, economic, political systems. And I like that idea that if you're just trying to address the climate change and not the sort of have a wider conversation about the systems, then you're not doing the right thing. And as well, it's a really interesting conversation about how coaches can identify, but also market themselves as coaches who are comfortable having a conversation of a systemic nature, which involves the specifics of the climate crisis. How coaches can market themselves in such a way that where they can appeal to their clients and talk about the holistic systemic nature without almost sort of scaring potential clients off or intimidating potential clients or sponsors off.
Or if we actually addressed what people may still believe as coaches, partly through training and a genuine belief that the client is the centre of everything. We hear many times that people say, but it's the client's agenda. So that's an honestly held position. And so often people are holding this notion of what does the client want? Whereas I suppose for me, the simple shift is what's the work we need to do? And it's the work we need to do from the point of view of many stakeholders. And so one can have a simple conversation about who are the stakeholders to our work? What are the influences on our work? Who are the future generations who might use your services in 10, 15, 20 years' time? What will their changing views be? What does that mean for the way your business is directed? So I think for me, the shift is what's the work we need to do. But I understand for people, they have this worry, quite rightly, that we might be sitting there saying to a client, so what do you think about climate change and what are you going to do about it? And I don't think it's like that. It's something that is both more subtle but also more fundamental. So one of the things people are very keen to talk about when given the opportunity is, what's important in your life? What matters most to you? And when people talk about that, areas like legacy will emerge. So for me, it's more about opening up conversations of possibility rather than being restricted by I want this, and this, when people may not have given themselves that opportunity to open up a discussion. What do you think, Alison?
I think you're right on that there, Eve. I think one of the things that we notice as we start to open up and have conversations with our colleagues in our community around the globe is how many assumptions we take with us and how actually they can really hold us back from having the conversation that we need to have, doing the work that we need to do, and actually giving the client permission to show up more fully, as well as ourselves permission.
So the other thing I would add to this conversation is that there is an assumption that people don't want to talk about climate change.
Yeah.
And in actual fact, and we find this amongst coaches as well, that when you actually open up the space, there's a great relief to be able to talk about it, that people are concerned, but they don't know what to do with it. Like they're living, and within corporates, for many of us that are working with clients who are corporate soldiers or warriors, whatever you want to call them. You know, they're living in a system that has asked them not to bring their whole selves to work, and they are working in a system that is actually doing damage, and they don't know how to change that. And so they do have concerns, a lot of people, but they don't know what to do with it. So for many people, it's a great relief for someone to ask them, you know, what are your concerns for the future? What do you care about? Or even, gee, there was a fire outside my house last weekend. I think that's a sign of climate change. What do you think? And then it just opens the whole conversation up. So I don't think that it's necessarily the case that people don't want to talk about it anymore. I admit there's some people that don't. I live in a country that there's an absolute international laggard in the space of climate change, so I know all about people being in denial, but I think things are moving really rapidly now.
If you look at the corporate landscape that people are operating in, then although there needs to be perhaps a more fundamental shift that people aren't necessarily able to have the conversation about, corporations are being measured on their environmental, social and governance capacity. They're being asked to demonstrate their sustainability credentials. And whilst 70% of the world's economy has got something that looks like a net zero target, there's questions about net zero and its viability for the transition. But there's only about 5% of those, those intentions that have got any robust underpinning to them. And so they've got these, or corporations have these sustainability targets, they're trying to do stuff, but they actually are really struggling to make that sticky, to make that shift. And that's where dialogue, coaches, curiosity, all the things that we bring allow that shift to occur. And so they need this, they're asking for it, and we are ready to step into that space, and yet we can easily hold ourselves back by imagining we're pushing something they don't want or need. I think they would really enjoy coaches bringing their skills into this space.
And it's a bit of a fallacious notion that actually coaches are limited to the agenda that their clients bring. But when you think about it, we raise lots of topics that are outside of our coaches' current awareness. So why is it that we're so concerned about raising something that is actually possibly a threat to the future of humanity? Why are we concerned about raising this particular topic within their lives? And it's just something that's within the context of our lives. It's there. Ignoring it is not going to make it go away. So it is interesting that we are so strongly trained around this notion of following our client's agenda, when in fact we don't do that a lot in our coaching anyway. We raise topics like, even if you think of the Wheel of Life, it's got a whole range of topics there that people may not necessarily think of in their ordinary day-to-day lives. And part of what we do for our clients is raise their awareness. So this is just one more thing that we're raising awareness around if they're not currently aware of it. Eve, I was just wondering if you're a little bit closer to the professional body's ethics, and I think you're aware of the global code of ethics. Is there something, there was a change recently, was there?
Yeah. So in fact, in July 2021, it was updated, and there's an even more explicit sort of slight tweak. So one of the things that new code says is that members should be guided by their clients' interests and at the same time raise awareness and responsibility to safeguard that these interests do not harm those of sponsors, stakeholders, wider society, or the natural environment. And coupled with that is, under the training element, is this idea that we need to make ourselves aware of areas around inclusion, diversity, technology, and developments in social and environmental needs. So I think there is a recognition, certainly among the coaching professional bodies, which we would hope would be picked up in terms of the training bodies, that this is really an important area of work, because we don't live in a vacuum. You know, every time I'm sitting here now, I'm breathing the air, I'm drinking a cup of tea, made with water. The earth is everywhere. It's everywhere present. And the idea that we are somehow separate from it or separate from other things is sort of crazy.
Some would say we are the earth.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Thanks for showing that, Eve.
I love that because it almost makes it unethical for us not to raise these things.
And not to be aware of them in the work that we do. And it can be done in such simple ways. It isn't about ramming it down someone's throat. It's simply about recognising who are the stakeholders. And people like to do things like constellations, or they do drawings and pictures. You can just bring in, and who else are the stakeholders, and who else, and what else is influencing us, and what else are we connected to? And it's back to what I said about opening up questions, can very naturally bring in all sorts of things. It's just allowing that space.
Thanks, Eve. And for those that aren't so familiar with the Global Code of Ethics, would you like to say a few words about that, and maybe a resource that you could direct those that are keen to learn more towards?
The Global Code of Ethics is a code of ethics that there are, I think now something like, there are certainly 8 or 9, maybe even recently a 10th one has signed the Global Code of Ethics. So it's a code of ethics that the Association for Coaching is signed up to, and the EMCC, the European Mentoring and Coaching Council, and APEX, which is the body I'm chair of, the Association for Professional Executive Coaching and Supervision. And there are obviously several others. And what's nice about it, it sits in its own website. So all you have to do is put in Global Code of Ethics into any browser, and it might offer you 1 or 2 others, but if you put in Global Code of Ethics and Coaching, it will come up straight away, and it's a green colour. So it's sort of beautifully positioned in terms of the earth, but actually it's to avoid any colours of any one professional body.
And that concludes part 1 of the conversation with Josie, with Eve, and with Alison, the founders of the Climate Coaching Alliance. So thank you for joining us today. Tune in next time for part 2. And it's been a pleasure to be with you for this episode of Coaching in the Climate Crisis. I've been George Warren. See you next time. This podcast was brought to you by the Association for Coaching. Discover more business and coaching resources, thought leadership, and online learning at associationforcoaching.com.